Hello and welcome to week 4 and 5. This video lecture will cover the topics of aging, intelligence, creativity, and wisdom, pages 97 to 135 in your textbook. It's Moody and Sasser have set this up as a controversy, and we're going to be talking a little bit about that in this video. Before I get into that, however, I want to be sure that you are prepared for the learning assessment that will cover weeks 3 and 4 materials. So I know this gets a little wonky, but we are in week 5 and 6. But in the week 5 and 6 folder is a learning assessment that's going to cover the material from week 3, as well as some of the material from week 4. And the week 4 material that will be covered in the learning assessment happens on pages, the learning assessment will cover content on pages 97 to 103. So I'm going to repeat that again. This is week 4 and 5. In the week 4 and 5 folder is a learning assessment that will cover material from week 3, biological process of aging, and a portion of your week 4 material that appears in your textbooks on pages 97 to 103. So I first want to begin with a quick recap of the key learning assessment or learning takeaways from week 3, biological process of aging. First of all, I want to be sure that you have taken a look at that Dan Buettner video on the blue zones and be able to articulate what the key points were in his video. What were the key learning points that he was trying to convey to us? The learning takeaways from week 3 is that, first of all, there's no universal consensus about what causes aging in our bodies. There are a lot of theories, but there's no one theory that's going to completely explain how or why our bodies age. There's also controversy around whether or not aging should be considered a disease. And the field of medicine somewhat looks at aging as a disease. It looks at aging as something that should be fixed, something that should be reversed and stopped. But gerontologists come from the perspective that aging is not a disease. And it's a part of our life course. It's a part of the natural course of life. So we need not think of it as a disease. We can influence the experience of our aging. That was the part of the message of the Jonathan Sullivan video that was also in week 3, is that aging is not all in our DNA and that there are controllable factors that help us age in a healthier way. Actually, Dan Buettner also makes that point in his video as well. We are making gains in society to reduce the prevalence of frailty. So one of the key takeaways from this chapter and this reading is that it really questions whether or not we should be focusing our research dollars on simply extending life for the sake of extending life, or should we really be focusing in on how we can help people live a more productive, healthy life in their older years. So it's not about living longer, it's about living longer healthier. How can we do that? And the Pew Research article also in week 3 somewhat reinforces that the research done by the Pew Research Center, the people that were surveyed actually indicate that they don't want to live to 120 years of age. That most people really have this understanding that there is a natural end to life. Dying is a part of our life course. So we need not fear age and aging and death and dying. We need to embrace it. And in doing so, it somewhat changes our psychological well-being towards aging. And that is a part of what Dr. Sullivan talks about, is that the way that we think about aging can affect our experience of aging. So those are the key takeaways from week 3, and you can expect questions on the biological process of aging to appear in the learning assessment that is posted in this week's folder. All right, moving on then to weeks 4 and 5. I want to begin by telling you that I have opened up the weeks 4 and 5 are in one folder, and then you have week 6 in another folder. I've opened up all 3 of those folders, or I'm sorry, 2 of those folders that cover 3 weeks of material. Those are all opening on January 25th. So you have 3 weeks of material that you have some time to get through. So I want to cover week 4 and 5 material in this week's folder. And then in week 6, I will do a lecture that will cover the content in week 6. One thing going back to week 3, before I go on to week 4 and 5, I want to be sure in that Jonathan Sullivan video that you understand what he is referring to when he talks about aging phenotypes. I also want you to understand the concept of entropy and the concept of healthy aging. So those are 3 things that occur in the video that is talked about by Dr. Sullivan. So moving on then to weeks 4 and 5, which I said covers pages 97 to 135 about intelligence, creativity, and wisdom. There are 2 types of intelligence that's talked about in this chapter. The first one is called fluid intelligence, and the second is called crystallized intelligence. So one of the controversies that exists is, can elderly people learn new things? Do they have the capacity to learn new things? Kind of sort of the joke around town, if you will, is that I gave my grandma a new iPhone and she had no idea how to work it, that type of thing. Well, let me try to explain the difference between fluid intelligence and crystallized intelligence. Fluid intelligence is intelligence that ongoing learning that builds upon itself. So, for example, let's say you start out working on a PC and then you decide you're going to switch to a Mac. Well, what you've learned on the PC, you can now apply some of that to learning how to work a Mac. So you're not starting from ground zero with the Mac. You've got basic knowledge about how a system like this works. And while there's some differences, you can take some of your learning about the PC and you can apply it to a Mac. Crystallized intelligence could be referred to as wisdom, that it's intelligence that you have now, it's like the accumulation of all of your learning is now there in crystallized intelligence. And crystallized intelligence is what gives us the wisdom and the experience to be able to cope and adapt with different situations that might come up in our life. So you can now take all of this wisdom. So an elderly person who has learned how to use a PC or a Mac, for example, they may not be able to build a computer, but they can take that crystallized intelligence, almost that long-term ingrained intelligence, and they can take that intelligence and they can teach other people what they've learned. So elderly people call upon their crystallized intelligence to get through life. And yes, it may take them longer to adapt to a new phone or to learn how to use Google Maps instead of reading an old-time map. But they have the ability to function in life because they have this crystallized intelligence. It may take them twice as long or 4 times or 5 times as long to learn how to transfer that intelligence of reading a road map to how to take a look at Google Maps, for example. And it might take them, it would take them, most elderly people, a longer period of time to learn these new things, whereas for younger people, it might not take as long. So older people can learn new things, they just learn in a different way, and they learn at a different speed. So we have to really stop this myth that older people have the inability to learn new things. And as caring professionals, people who are working with the elderly in whatever capacity we are, we have to find ways to help our clients continue to apply their crystallized intelligence and to not be afraid to help teach them new things. And so that's one of the takeaways from this reading, is that we just can't discount older people. Now, this is set up as a controversy because there are researchers who have researched this topic and they have come to different conclusions. For example, Harry Lehman on your reading number 11, which starts actually on page 109, Harvey Lehman says that really somebody's ability to be productive and to make contributions to society really peaks around the age of 40 and then declines right after that. So I want to be sure that you take a look at reading number 11, but then I also want you to read reading number 12, which is by another researcher by the last name of Dennis, Wayne Dennis, who pokes a lot of holes in the research that was done by Mr. Lehman, by saying that there were lots of factors that he did not consider, factors that influence somebody's ability to learn and contribute other than just chronological age. And so take a look at that reading number 12 as well. The takeaway from this is that there are other factors other than chronological age that affect our ability to learn. One of those things is motivation. So if somebody's not really very motivated to learn how to use a new iPhone or to use a new computer, there's not the motivation there. That's going to affect their ability to learn. And so, some sensory impairments, somebody who has poor vision, poor hearing, things along those lines can affect somebody's ability to learn. So it's not just chronological age. Somebody who is even younger, who has sensory impairments, would have a hard time learning things at the same pace that somebody who doesn't have those sensory impairments. So we can't just settle on chronological age as the single and only factor that contributes to our inability to learn new things or that we lose intelligence. There is this concept of developmental intelligence that I also want to be sure that you have an understanding about. And let me see what page that shows up on. That is, you're going to read that between pages 125 and 135 about developmental intelligence. And it's an intelligence that is more applicable to older people than just doing an IQ test. So researchers have been trying to find ways to really measure intelligence and wisdom in older people, so that we can somewhat bust this myth that old age causes an inability, if you will, to learn new things and contribute. I think those are the main things. I also want you to be sure to, oh, nope, that's jumping ahead to the next chapter. The next chapter we're going to be talking about is aging, healthcare, and society, and that's getting into more of our healthcare system. So don't read too far ahead in the book. Really, at this point, you should be up to working your way up to page 135. I think I've covered all of the things with intelligence and creativity. If you have questions, you know how to find me. And if I have any updates to this lecture or anything that I think about that I've forgotten, I will post it as an announcement in your folders. All right. So happy reading, and I will talk to you soon. Bye-bye.